fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Does more money make you happy? Hey everybody, Joe Simons, Like Diamonds, back again, Salt Strong, Unchurched. This is going to be, in my opinion, one of the most powerful, hard-hitting, and critical podcasts, maybe even of the year. And here's why. I am very certain that if we just went around and randomly asked 1,000 people if they would like to have more money, they would say yes, right? Who wouldn't? And I would also wager to bet that if we asked those same 1,000 people or a different 1,000 people, if they'd like to have more happiness, if they'd like to be happier, they would all say yes. And I'd also be willing to bet if we asked the same 1,000 people, hey, do you believe that maybe a little bit more money or a lot more money would make you happier? And there might be a couple that, might waver, say maybe, but the vast majority, if not 98% of them, would say yes, that there is a correlation. This is what we believe, that there's a correlation between money and happiness, that the more you have, the happier you are. And there's a book called How to Get Rich, literally called How to Get Rich. And it's from Felix Dennis. And it says the subtitle, One of the World's Greatest Entrepreneurs Shares His Secrets. And this is wild. It's crazy how God puts the right message in front of us at the right time. Maybe this is one of those for you. And I read this book. I personally bought this book many years ago when I had no money. And I truly believe that, man, if I could just get more money, I'd be happier. And I saw this book called How to Get Rich by a guy who was rich. At the time, he was worth like $900 million approximately. So almost a billionaire. I would say that's pretty rich. Today's standards. And he's the founder of like Maxim magazine. He's basically one of the bigger magazine tycoons like PC World and all these different random magazines that you would see at a Publix or Walmart or whatever. He's behind a lot of them and owns a vast majority of them. So he has built this just conglomerate of magazines, and he shared his whole story. And what's interesting is, the book's like, 280 pages, and like 90% of it is literally kind of his blueprint on how he got rich. But sprinkled in there are all of these. He's kind of like one of those guys, kind of like a comedian where they self-deprecate on themselves and kind of, say, well, yeah, I did do this, but at the same point, I got divorced 3 times. So he's kind of weaving in all of his mistakes and the ways that he got blindsided by money, and the fact that, he burned a lot of bridges and ruined relationships and got into drugs and some pretty bad stuff. Let's just say, I'll keep it family friendly, but you can use your imagination. I mean, just really went down the path of like, Pinocchio in the movie Pinocchio, where he kind of gets into his worst and starts, hanging out with the wrong crowd and smoking cigarettes and drinking booze. And he went down that path, and just, you could tell he was just constantly searching for happiness. And so I read the book, in the very end, he basically just says, hey, you're almost an idiot for chasing happiness. It is fleeting. It will not get you there. And you're going to wake up one day with all these regrets. And I kind of like brushed it off, and I'm going to read you. It's one paragraph, and it's probably the most important paragraph in this book. And here's where it gets wild. So I read this book years ago, put it away, kind of forgot about it. And I was on the way down to the Keys, and I listened to just random podcasts. I kind of had like on a podcast shuffle from the different podcasts that I subscribe to, like Unchurched or Salt Strong podcast in general. And one of them that came up just kind of randomly, it was like halfway through the ride, was a podcast called Founders. And it's this young man that reads all of these books, and he basically just curates some of his favorite books on different founders. And this book was the one that he was featuring in this episode. And as soon as he started talking about it, I was like, wait a minute, I've read that book. And once again, this just literally came up randomly. I didn't choose to listen to this. I just have it on kind of a shuffle, letting God put the right messages in front of me at the right time. And so this guy on the Founders Podcast starts reviewing the How to Get Rich. And he talked a little bit about, the tactics, if you will, and the things that Felix Dennis talks about on how he got rich, but spent the majority of this, hour-long podcast talking about what I want to share with you today. And it was almost kind of the shocking part is a guy writes a book on how to get rich and didn't need to write this book. But it turns out, and this is the part that gave me like goosebumps, and I didn't know this until this guy on the Founders Podcast shared it. He's like, so this guy Felix writes this book. I guess I got it right when it got published. In like less than 2 years, like 18 months, he dies. So, and you can kind of tell knowing that now when you read this book, and even when I'm about to share with you, you can tell he's kind of writing to his younger self or to anyone who will listen. It's almost like he knew his time was coming, because he basically just kind of paints the picture that, hey, my time is running low. I know I don't have much left. And he wasn't that old. I mean, he was, 68, 70 years old. But you could just tell how he's writing that he had this just weird feeling that he was going to pass away soon. And he did. So that makes it even more powerful, right? This is almost like one of those just messages you get from someone on their deathbed about their regrets and what they did right in life, what they did wrong, and their whole perception on things like money and happiness and fulfillment. So that's the 30,000 foot view to kind of let you know why this is important. And I in general, he talks about time. And he says the richest people in the world are kids and just the youth, really. He says anyone younger than me, because you have time, which is the most valuable asset. And we've all heard this, right? We've probably heard this as kids. Hey, enjoy that time. Like, you can't get that back, right? And sadly, all of us, right, no matter where you are, we always believe we're going to live longer, right? I mean, if we're 40 years old, we believe we're going to live to 80 and we got tons. We're only halfway through. And for 20, we believe we're going to live to 100. And man, I got all the time in the world. And even if you're 65, you believe you're going to live to 85. If you're 85, you're going to believe, hey, I still got 10 more, maybe 15 more years left in me. And we all tend to kind of believe we're going to keep living for a lot longer until that a lot longer kind of goes away and you see your time coming like Felix did. But he talks about, it's so sad that especially as youth, we have the most valuable thing there is, but we are wasteful and we don't appreciate it because it's so abundant, right? And I remember when I was younger, all I wished was that I could be older and rich, right? I mean, what a cruel world if you think about it. So you finally get to that point where you are older and have all these riches like this guy. I mean, $900 million of net worth. That's let's get this crazy. It's hard to even fathom. Unless you're a billionaire, then it's like, oh yeah, I already did that. But for the most of us, it's pretty tough to fathom, right? And what a cruel world, right? And so I want you to just remember that part is the time that he says multiple times, I trade all of this. I literally give every penny back just to have that time. I trade it in today, no questions asked. The other one, this ties in with the Bible and God and Unchurched, is the giving part. And he talks a lot about the importance of giving. And every time he did it, it made him feel amazing that every time he gave away money or time or anything that had real value, he said it was some of the most joyful times I've had. But he had this massive, massive struggle on giving away money. And it weighed on him so much and caused him a lot of anxiety, and which led to even more unhappiness. And he spent a whole chapter on giving and the importance of it. And he's like, it's been on his shoulders to give away the majority of his wealth while he's alive. He knows it'll make him happy, but he flat out admits in this book, he's like, it is this massive fear I have that if I give it all away, it might not come back. And what if I run out of money? What will this do? It was literally all based on fear. And that weighed on him so heavily that it caused him even more anxiety and more unhappiness. And God tells us that. And in the Bible, it's talked about multiple times about money and being giving and generous and not letting money rule you. And it seems like that's what happened with this guy's life. He's like, it literally, it, even though he can write about it and talk about it and kind of poke fun about it and poke fun of himself, it literally it's all that drove him through life. He finally got it, realized he needed to give back, tried it a few times, felt amazing, but had so much fear and anxiety that if he gave it all away, or even a big chunk of it, that it might not come back, that it would be fleeting. And then he wouldn't have time or money, and it cost him to be miserable. The other one is, the regrets he talks about is, because he spent all of his time solely focused on just making more money, that he didn't have time for a family, didn't raise a family, went through multiple divorces, never really spent time building relationships. And he says, once you get to the top, you find out pretty quickly that a lot of these friends aren't real friends. They're there because of your money or your Rolodex or your relationships. They all want something from you. They're not real friends. And he says it's pretty lonely up there. I think the other one is, what does it mean to be rich? And that's what kind of leads into to this. So what I'm about to read to you is at the very end of the book. So this guy now, he has a weird feeling that he's not going to be around much longer. He spent 260 pages. Normally it takes a year or so to write a book. So this is the very, very, very end. And so he's talked all this, 200 plus pages about making money and how he did it in his whole story. And now he basically says, hey, I've just showed you how to make this money, but here's the truth. And he's talking about what happens when you get there. And he says, there is no escape. You believe, in parentheses, and I know you do, that it'll be different for you when you make money and you're rich. So I'm going to repeat that. There is no escape. You believe, I know you do, that it will be different for you when you make money, but it won't be. It never is. Happiness, don't make me laugh. The rich are not happy. I have yet to meet a single really rich, happy man or woman, and I've met many rich people. The demands from others to share their wealth become so tiresome and so insistent. They nearly always decide they must insulate themselves. And insulation breeds paranoia and arrogance and loneliness and rage that you only have so many years left to enjoy rolling in the sand that you've piled up, the money you've piled up. The only people the self-made rich can trust are those who knew them before they became wealthy. For many newly rich people, the world becomes a smaller, less generous, and darker place. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Ridiculous and gloomy. But then you are to consider that I have been very poor and now I am very rich. I'm an optimist by nature, and I have the ability to write poetry and to create the forest I am busy planting. He loves planting and gardening. Am I happy? No. Or at least, whoa, it's powerful, right? Am I happy? No. Or at least only occasionally when I am walking in the woods alone or deeply ensconced in composing a difficult piece of verse. He loves writing poetry, or sitting quietly with old friends over a bottle of wine, or maybe feeding a stray cat. But here's the irony. I could do all of those things without wealth. Wow. So let me repeat that. This is so powerful. So he literally says, I'm not happy. After all this, he says, am I happy? No. And if I ever met a happy rich person, he literally says, do not make me laugh. The rich are not happy. He says, am I happy? No. Only occasionally when I'm walking in the woods alone or doing poetry or sitting quietly with old friends over a bottle of wine or feeding a stray cat. none of those things take money. None of those things take wealth. And his point is that is wealth. That does make me rich. The fact that I can do the things that make me happy, that's what it means to be rich. That was the whole point of this whole book that he finally ties in at the very, very last page. He's like, you need to change your definition of what does it mean to be rich and wealthy. We all associate it with just money. But he's like, here I am with $900 million. And the only thing that actually brings me happiness is walking in the woods, where he's probably got maybe some relationship with God. He certainly struggled with this, which may be partially why he wasn't as happy. And doing poetry, gardening, or talking quietly with old friends over a bottle of wine, or feeding a stray cat, just being generous. And that's what makes him happy. That's like the only things that bring him any sense of like happiness and fulfillment. And it doesn't take money, maybe except $20 for a bottle of wine, to do any of those things. So let me keep going. I could do all those things without wealth. So why don't I just give it all away? Because I work too hard for it, and because I am tainted by it. Because I'm afraid to. All those reasons and more. Perhaps if I am lucky enough to become old, I will accumulate something else, the courage to give it all away before I die. That would be a good thing, I think. That is powerful. Giving money away when you're dead takes no guts, no courage. But to divest yourself of hundreds of millions of dollars or the greater part of your fortune before you death, that would be something to be proud of, don't you think? It even makes logical sense. Oh, man. For what is left afterward but a few tears by a graveside and years of bickering and waste over a complex will from your kids. The wills of the rich are always complex. Bitter years where lawyers count the number of fairies they believe you once thought danced upon the head of a pin. Years in which they enrich themselves at your descendants' expense. A fine legacy, to be sure. Wow. Isn't that crazy? I once again, it's so powerful how God brings these right messages right to us at the right time. I mean, it gives me goosebumps reading this stuff. And the fact that I already read this book and literally, I mean, I can poke fun at myself. I did what he said. This is, you believe, and I know you do, that it'll be different for you. I remember reading that and just kind of like shrugging it off, and even shrugging off this whole last chapter. Like, oh yeah, that's not going to be me. I'm going to do it different. It's so crazy. And here he is. And like I said, the most powerful part is that he did pass away right after this. And I mean, that means like this was stuff that was just coming to him. It was like God was putting this into his head to put down on writing to share with all of us so we don't make the same mistakes. I mean, Felix unfortunately died pretty lonely. I'm sure a lot of people did show up to his funeral, but they were just a lot of people that were there from him, as he said, for the money. They weren't there, the people that he enjoyed spending time with, the old friends when he was poor, that would just enjoy a cheap $20 bottle of wine with them and really just wanted to talk and have a relationship. So I think this is incredibly powerful. Remember, money doesn't just make you rich. To his point, rich to him was doing something, having the time and the ability and some amount of money to do the things that make you happy. And for him, the things that made him happiness were writing. I mean, that takes a little bit of money to buy a pen or a pencil and some paper. But other than that, not much, a few bucks. The $20 of wine was the most expensive thing. And I guess gardening, if you had to buy some seeds, but all this stuff in the big scheme of things, you could all day long buy on minimum wage, or even just be lucky and have someone gift it to you. So really, really fascinating about just reflecting, especially here at the end of the year, on what truly makes you happy. And does that even take money? As he said, everyone thinks that it's going to be different for them, and I'm going to do it different. But it says, he hasn't seen it yet. And he's like, most of my rich friends, he talks about that in the book, are miserable. Almost all of them have, been divorced or having an affair, and which will eventually lead into a divorce. And none of them, especially the ones who are just chasing the money just to keep accumulating more to get to that next level, never really seem to find happiness. It's fleeting. It it just comes and goes super, super quick. And now here he is, essentially getting close to his deathbed, even though he didn't know it when he was writing this. And he just had a sense about it. And, his big thing at the end was, being brave enough and bold enough to give all the money away versus, just sitting on it until he passes away and having the lawyers make millions of dollars just working out the whole will. Really, really fascinating. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. The book is called How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. And if you love reading books, definitely a great one to get. But I summed up really the most powerful part at the end. And that was, just the regrets he had and about giving and about time that, hey, I'd trade all of this right back. I'd go down to $1. I'd be broke. I'd figure it out because he goes, I know I can find ways to make money. We all can. We all have some gift to make money. Even if you just have a pulse, you can go get some job these days. And, he's like, I'd give all that back. I'd literally give every penny back just, be 20 again to have all of that time to enjoy it. So if you're young and hearing this, we're all young if we're still alive, enjoy that time, cherish it, maximize it, spend it with the people that you love being around. Do the things that truly do give you happiness. Go take some walks in the woods or a boat ride or a kayak ride out in the water. Get closer with God. And got a lot of fun episodes coming up here that I've been kind of writing down and talking through in my own head that I think will have a pretty big impact on you. So I appreciate you guys and all the feedback. If this one hit home, or if you have any other thoughts or life lessons that you've learned about money and things like this, hit me up. I love hearing from you. It's Joe, Joe, at saltstrong.com is my email, joe@saltstrong.com. Otherwise, we'll talk to you on the next episode.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul, it was past